welcome to another book review video. Get a snack, get a drink, because we're about to get into it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 books to go over with you. However, one was a DNF, so we'll go over that. I'm gonna format this just like I did the last one, where I'm gonna give you my quick stars to begin with, and then once I give you guys the stars, we will have timestamps, and if you scroll through the bar, you'll be able to see where I talk about each, and there will be spoilers, just so you guys know. Spoilers will be there. And yeah, we're just gonna go in the order in which I read them. Yeah, so my rating system: 1 star, hated it, would not recommend, why did I waste my time reading this, awful. 2 stars is I can see why other people might like it, but it just wasn't for me, so I wouldn't recommend. 3 stars is just meh, it was fine, not mad that I read it, wouldn't really recommend it. 4 stars would be oh my god, loved this, would recommend to most people. And then 5 stars is couldn't put it down, stayed up reading it, amazing, everybody should read this. So first we're gonna go with my 1 DNF before we get into everything else. Then I'll go over everything else, the order that I read it. We had Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I just couldn't get into it. I didn't realize that this was about video games, which is kind of an on me situation, and it was a narration, which I've learned I don't love narrated books. So that, between the combo of that and it felt overly descriptive, I was not a fan. But Chris might really like this because he loves all things about video games, so that is gonna go to him to try and read. The next book that I read was, I'm gonna just lay these bad boys out. Beyond the Wand, The Magic and Mayhem of Growing Up a Wizard by Tom Felton. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. Then next I read Pumpkinheads, which I don't have with me because I borrowed that from Andrea. I'll have Chris insert a picture when we get to the actual thorough description. I gave that a 4 out of 5. And then I also borrowed Beach Read from Andrea, which I gave a 4 out of 5 by Emily Henry. And Pumpkinheads is by Rainbow Rowell. Next I read Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman. This I gave a 3 out of 5. Then I read The Perfect Marriage by Jeneva Rose. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This was really nice, good, whatever. And then I read Twisted Love by Huang, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5. However, okay, this is the cover I have, cute, not creepy. This is the cover that is on Goodreads, and I hate it with a burning passion, but I gave this one a 4. Then I read Happy People Are Annoying by Josh Peck, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I read The Roommate, which is the first book in the Shameless series by Rosie Danan. This I gave a 4 out of 5, a lot of 4s. Then I read We Were Liars by Lockhart, and I gave this a 2. Sorry guys. Then I read The No Show by Beth O'Leary, or Leary. This I gave a 3. And then my most recent finish is Every Summer After by Carley Fortune, and this I gave a 5 out of 5. Now we are just gonna, I guess I'll just go in that same order and go into my in-depth description, only because I don't have all the books with me, so it makes it kind of tricky to do it by order of ranking. When I'm don't have them here to look at, I might forget about them. So we will start with my boy Tommy F. So this was a 5 out of 5. First off, I am a die-hard Harry Potter fan. That is my thing. I have a half sleeve Harry Potter theme, and I've got multiple Harry Potter tattoos on my legs, on my abdomen. We are just dedicated to the cause here. And this was Tom Felton's autobiography, and I just thoroughly loved it. I liked learning about his childhood and the different acting things he did prior to Harry Potter, and then we got to hear a lot about his relationships of while he was working with like the cast of Harry Potter. And this book actually came out right after Robbie Coltrane, is that how you, Coltrane? Robbie Hagrid. The Hagrid actor passed away like the same week that this came out, and so it was very like emotional, especially when he was talking about like their relationship and working together. And if you have the like physical copy, there are a bunch of like photos periodically of like Tom when he was a kid, and I just thought that was like quite cute. I think my favorite part of the book actually is the foreword by Emma Watson. It like really touched me, and I thought it was very good. And I then liked learning about like how him and Emma still have like a very good relationship. I think that's quite cute. And one thing he mentioned was that like for me, it's like all the Harry Potter actors are just famous as hell. But he was saying how like when he lived in California, like he could go to the beach and nobody would really say anything to him. And then Emma came to visit him one summer, and like they couldn't leave the house because everybody stops at Emma. But because he doesn't naturally look like his character, like he doesn't have the white hair and stuff, people don't tend to stop him. But you learn about his like struggle with like alcohol and all of that, and it was just very like learning about like how being rich doesn't necessarily mean you have all of the money. It means more like who you surround yourself with and how you feel about yourself. So overall, I just really loved that book. Would recommend to any Harry Potter fan. And this is like a sidebar that has nothing to do with the actual book, but I laughed quite a few times. When my sister was writing her maid of honor speech, she used the word normality. And one of our mutual friends was proofreading it and was like, that's not a real word. And Haley was like, yeah, it is. What do you mean it's not a real word? This book had that word in it a lot of times. So I'm like, that's it. She's just British. That's the deal. So it's really good. Next, I read Pumpkinheads. Chris will pop up the actual cover, but here she is. It's super cute. This was a graphic novel. And it was about these two friends. What were their names? Deja and Josiah, and they worked at a pumpkin patch every fall together, and it was their like senior year of high school. They were going to be going away to college, and it was Josiah's last chance to let Fudge Girl know, the girl who worked at the fudge stand, that he had a crush on her. And so him and Deja blow off their last shift, and they're like going through all the different stands. They're like, oh, she's actually working at here tonight, and they go through like all the different places trying to find Fudge Girl. And then when he finally finds her, she just starts like trashing like the fall carnival. It's like, this is stupid, I hate it here, this place is so dumb, I can't wait to be done here. And he realizes even though Fudge Girl was so pretty and cute, she like kind of sucked. And then he realizes the whole time that he's really in love with Deja, and then he like confesses it to her, and they smooch, and it was a cute time. So that was a 4 out of 5. I do recommend. Very short. I read it in probably like an hour and a half, but it was really good. And then next, we'll have Chris pop it up, but we did Beach Read by Emily Henry. And this was about Augustus in January. And so January has like this really bad writer's block. She used to write just like a bunch of love stories, but she's having a hard time believing in love at the moment. So she's like having a very difficult time writing. And this is because like her dad passed away, and once he passed away at the funeral, she learned of her dad's mistress, and that he was kind of like secretly leading this double life. And she, when he dies, inherits his like home that was like at this beach where he kind of like lived with his mistress. It was like the area he grew up in as a child. But because of all this, she's like not really believing in true love. So she's like led a very like life where like good things just keep happening. Like her mom gets diagnosed with cancer but is cured. This happens, but there's like a solution. Like everything works itself out for her in her life. So this like really feels earth-shattering to her. So she goes and is staying at this house to try to like, she has to clean it out so she can sell it, whatever. And she is having a hard time going through stuff and trying to write. And then she meets the neighbor, and she recognizes him immediately as this guy, Gus, that she went to college with, and she hated him. They were like rivals. He was always like ragging on her for writing romance, blah, 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 blah. So over time, they kind of develop a friendship, and he like admits that like he does remember her, and they decide that he's gonna try to write a romance story, and she's gonna try to write like a thriller, I guess, a mystery thriller that he writes. And so on Saturdays, on Fridays, he takes her on like an adventure to like interview somebody or like do this to try to help her with writing a more dark story. And then she'll take him on like some cutesy over the top date on Saturday to teach him about love. Throughout the book, they like help each other writing and they fall in love, and it's just overall really cute. And like you find out that she has this like stack of letters from her dad that she's never opened, and the mistress brought them to her at her dad's funeral and was like, your dad wanted you to have this and he told me I had to give it to you. And it turned out her dad had written her a letter every year for her birthday. And so she like went through, read all of them, and like it's like giving me chills now. Like as somebody like with a dead parent, it was just like very touching, very emotional, and I like highly recommend. Moving on, I read Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman, and this book was honestly kind of hard to follow, but it's about a girl named, oh my god, I forgot. There like was somewhere in here it told you how to pronounce her name. I don't know, C-H-A-N-I, Chnee? Yeah, it was knee with a C-H, Chnee Horowitz. It's about her, and like back when she was 20, like 10 years ago, she interviewed this like famous celebrity, Gabe, and they spent like 3 days together in this whirlwind, blah, 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 and they, oh my god, it was just so corny. So they like go to parties together, and like all of this happens in 3 days, and then he like never talks to her again. He had told her he wasn't dating this one like coworker of his, and then they get married like a couple of days later, and all of this nonsense. And then 10 years later, she goes through a terrible divorce, and she's asked to re-interview him, and they end up falling in love. But it was kind of hard to follow because it would be like they had these like sections of then and now, but like then sometimes you wouldn't really know where you are in time. Like it would feel like you're in the past, and then it wouldn't in between, like because it would just be like Friday of then or Friday of now, don't really know. And there would be like these weird like articles, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I would not recommend it. I feel like I can't even describe it because it was so like meh. It was just meh. It's like this is the best way to describe it. It's meh. 4 out of 5. We have The Perfect Marriage, and like I said, this is going to have spoilers. So if you have not read this book, please skip over this part because I will say who the killer is. Just warning you again. So this book essentially is about this girl, Sarah, and she is like a high-profile defense attorney in Washington, D.C., and her husband, Adam, is a struggling writer. Sarah is always working, is not like putting in much effort to their relationship because she's such a workaholic. They don't have any children. She doesn't really want kids. Yeah, and then they also have this like house, like a vacation home, and Adam had asked her like, oh, like they had plans to go there for their 10-year anniversary, and she kind of blew him off. And so he's been having an affair with a girl named Kelly Summers, and one morning Adam is arrested for the murder of Kelly. They found her dead in their vacation home, and Sarah decides like immediately, even though like her husband was cheating on her, she's gonna stand by him and defend him. And so a lot of it is like going through trying to figure out like who actually did it. Like I kind of got the sense from the beginning it definitely was not Adam, and immediately your thought goes to, because Kelly was married, was, oh my god, it has to be Kelly's husband. Gonna go change my battery, I'll be right back. If the frame changed, I apologize. Yeah, had to go change the battery. But yeah, so I pretty much immediately knew it wasn't Adam, and then I got thinking it was Kelly's husband, and like then I really stopped believing it was him. And then there was this one sheriff who was like getting too close to Sarah, like very weird, kind of creepy, and I was like, it's gotta be him. And then they found so they're trying to figure out like suspects. They investigate like Kelly's body, and they find that there's 3 sets of DNA in her. One of them is Adam's, one of them is her husband, and then there's this third mystery DNA. And the second I found that out, I'm like, it's Sheriff Stevens. It has to be him. He has to be the murderer, 100%. And then as you're like learning stuff, you find out that there's like this picture that was hidden away in Adam's desk of a picture of him and Kelly that he had gotten like in the mail or dropped off that just said, you tell her or you end this or I will. or something to that effect. They're like, oh my god, had to be the murderer that like found out about the affair. And then we find out that that handwriting matches Sarah's assistant, Anne. So then we're like, oh my god, is it Anne? But then in the same sense, you find out that Kelly's name wasn't actually Kelly. Her name was, I think, Jenna. And she was married before and accused of killing her husband. And then she, like, Scott, her husband, her new husband, like, got her, like, off on the charges. And, like, she, like, was free. And then she married him. And it was just, like, this whirlwind. Then you find out that Sarah's coworker, Bob, is, like, brothers with Kelly's husband who was murdered. And so we're like, oh my god, maybe it's Bob out to get revenge and whatever. So you go through switching between both Sarah and Adam's point of view, and then you get to like the day of the trial, because Adam's like, I'm not, like, I preferred being in Sarah's mind. Adam was very like chaotic. He was like talking to reporters, writing a book about being arrested, like very like all over the place. But trial happens and he is sentenced guilty, and they find him guilty and he is sentenced to life or to like being executed. So the day of his execution comes, and Sarah hadn't gone to see him in like 10 years, and like she went and to like say goodbye basically, and they chatted, whatever, and she stayed and watched the execution. And then as he's being executed, it like talks about how she was like smiling, and before they put like the thing over Adam's head, like he saw her smile. And oh my god, it's giving me chills. You basically find out that Sarah's the one who murdered Kelly. Sarah knew about the affair and she killed her to frame Adam and get him executed basically. And Bob was on it all along. Her and Bob are together. They end up having a daughter, and they named her Summer, like Kelly Summers. Mind blown. This was so good. 4 out of 5. Highly recommend. After I finished that one, I moved right along into Twisted Love. So this was about a girl named Ava, and we switched between her point of view and this guy Alex. And Ava, she like doesn't have a lot of memories from her childhood. She has nightmares about them, but like can't remember a lot of things. And like she's been through some traumatic incidents, and her brother is very, very protective of her. And then her brother is going on like to do some sort of like program in like South America or South Africa or somewhere. He's gonna be leaving, so he asks his best friend Alex to look over her. And Alex moves in, like Ava and her brother lived next door, and so Alex takes her brother's house to like watch over Ava. And Alex is like very like dark and mysterious, and you don't really know much about him. He doesn't even really smile. And Ava and her friends, one of them's like kind of like a bit of a scandalous gal, more power to her. One of them's like actually like a princess of like some small country. Her friends are like, we have to like get him to like have emotion, like we gotta do it. So they like start working on like softening Alex, and within time Alex and Ava start dating, which is pretty cute, and you think everything's going good. But then Ava keeps having these nightmares, and you're starting to learn along the way about like her trauma as a child. And you learn that her mother and father got divorced, and her mom like was very depressed and suicidal, and she tried to drown Ava, and then her dad saved her. So that's what you think. And then Alex and Ava go to Alex always joins Ava's family for all holidays, but like her brother's away, but she like Alex is still coming to the family Thanksgiving, so Ava and Alex and the dad have Thanksgiving together. And that night Ava gets like all of her memories back basically, that it wasn't her mother who pushed her and tried to kill her, it was her dad. So that happens, and she eventually tells Alex, and then they find out that like her dad also tried to like smother her at a different time, and whatever. So that happens, and they get her dad arrested, and like he admits to it all, and that apparently Ava wasn't even his daughter. His wife was having an affair, and that's why he did it, and that's why he always hated her. And the only reason he didn't succeed at smothering her the second attempt was that like her brother came home early from school, and it was just like it was a lot. It was a lot, but it was really good, very interesting. There were some like steamy moments, so if you're not into that type of stuff, then that's fine, but there is some in here, so I will let that be known. But then Alex basically is also going through this thing where his trauma is that he witnessed his mother, father, and little sister get murdered, and he has had this revenge plan to like get back at the murderer, and then he finds out that the murderer was his uncle the whole time. And so he stages this murder of his uncle, and then his uncle kidnaps Ava and one of her friends, and it's like this whole thing. And Alex basically tells Ava that he never liked her, it was all a ruse, that like to like basically destroy her dad's business and blah 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 blah, but it wasn't the truth. Over time, like he started to like her, and Ava ended up getting like this internship in like London. So she moves there, and Alex shows up, and he's like, well, I want to protect you, like I want to keep you safe, da 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 da, you don't have to talk to me, but like I'm just gonna like stay here and make sure you're safe. And then it was kind of like stalker energy. I really didn't like that part. It was kind of creepy, but eventually like she gave in. I was like, you know, I know, like I actually love you, and then they live happily ever after. But this is a book in a 4-part series. This one's Twisted Love. There's Twisted Games, Twisted Hate, and Twisted Lies about each of her friends. I believe the second one, Twisted Games, is about her friend who's like a princess and like falling in love with her bodyguard, I think is the premise. So there was that. Then we read Happy People Are Annoying by the good old Josh Peck, and this book was like laugh out loud funny. Like I really enjoyed it. There were plenty of moments in which I was giggling to myself. Josh is just a funny guy. Like the about the author part is just, it like actually made me laugh. Where is she? About Josh Peck. This is how long it is, first of all, and it just says Josh Peck is an actor, comedian, and I guess an author now. Podcast, social media, speaking engagements, blah blah blah. So this goes through like Josh's early years, about how like his mom slept with a married man and got pregnant with him and blah blah blah, all that stuff, their life in New York City, that they were poor and he was fat and he had like an addiction to food, and a lot of it was going on about like him being super overweight and it like being a very big like thing in his life. He would steal food from like his friends' houses, and everything was about food. And then like he started doing comedy, and then he wanted to get into acting, and he like didn't have any like foot in the door, and he really like went for it. Eventually he got on like the Amanda Show and all that type sketch comedy on Nickelodeon, and then he eventually landed Drake and Josh. And you learn about like how little he actually made on Drake and Josh, which was wild to me. They like, the first couple of seasons he made one amount, second half he made this amount, so it was an average of whatever, and then like basically minus like all of like the fees for like the agent and this and that, it came down to he made about like $45,000 a year while making Drake and Josh. And apparently child actors, like they don't get residual checks from the shows, so that like low-key sucks. And it talks about like how he struggled with money, and then he like got into drugs pretty heavily, which like I feel like you can assume, but like I don't like to assume that about child actors, and like I really did not know that about Josh. And he talks about how he lost weight, and he thought that losing weight would be like the key to like everything getting better, and like he held this like thing in his mind, like he couldn't do X, Y, or Z until he lost weight, and then he lost the weight and realized he still wasn't happy. So he still to this day goes to like AA meetings and whatever, because he had an addiction to both drugs and alcohol, and about like getting clean and how he's been clean for like 20 years. And he says even to like this day, he doesn't tell people that he's gonna stay clean forever. He's like, I hope to, that's the goal, but like with recovery, you don't know. And as somebody who's like known quite a few addicts in their life, like it was very emotional. It talks about how things started going really good for him on Vine, and then he blinked and Vine was done. So then he had to pivot and start doing long form content on YouTube and Instagram. And he would get very embarrassed when people would ask him like, oh, so like what's next? And like, not that there's anything wrong with being like an influencer or a YouTuber, but like going from being like a TV actor, it felt like he was taking a step back to him, and like he was quite embarrassed by it. And so he eventually had to come to terms with he wasn't acting anymore. He wasn't gonna go to auditions anymore. He wasn't gonna do it anymore. And once he did that, it felt free. He felt freed, I guess. And so, I don't know. It was just very good. It was very funny. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I would highly recommend if you are a fan of Drake and Josh, my sister is actually gonna pick that one up and read it. Next up, we have The Roommate by Rosie Danan. This book was written in narration, which was like my first romance written in narration, and I didn't love that, which is why I gave the book a 4 out of 5 and not a 5. But I did really like this book. So it was about this girl, Clara Wheaton, and her family. She gave me like very Blair Waldorf energy, like very like entitled, lives in New York, rich, doesn't have to work for anything, comes from old money, prissy, whatever. But like she's kind of like sick of just like that life. Like she wants to like be able to make some of her own decisions. And she has a friend, this guy, I don't even remember his name. He's really not that important. But Everett, yeah, Everett. She has this guy, Everett, who she's had a crush on for all this time. He moved to LA and he was like, listen, I have a spare room. Come out to LA and do your own thing for a while. And she was like, oh, hell yeah. So she gets there, and as they're like driving to the house, he's like, oh, by the way, I rented out my room. And she's like, the one I'm about to be staying in? And he's like, no, my room. So like, I'm leaving. My band got like some sort of tour type of gig, and like basically I found this guy on Craigslist and he's gonna be living with you. His name's Josh. And she's like, oh my god. So she's living with this guy Josh, and she's like, here are the ground rules, like don't be messy, like all of these rules, here's our tour chart, very type A personality. And he's just kind of like, okay, whatever girl, that's fine. So they kind of like don't have much of a relationship. They're just like chat here and there, but like it's fine. And then she kind of has a meltdown where she's like, I don't belong here in LA, I'm going back to New York. And he kind of like brings her back to earth and is like, no, if you came out here to prove yourself, then you need to prove yourself. You don't want to go back and be like, I failed. And you learn that she has an aunt who lives in LA who was basically disowned by their family. And she meets her, she like gives her a job, but the only problem is that Clara doesn't drive. She's terrified of driving because she like got into a really bad car accident. Her brother ended up like with a broken arm or something to that effect. And so she's got to learn to drive, and Josh is like, I'll teach you, whatever. So she's telling her aunt about her roommate, Josh, and she's like, oh, like what's he look like? And so she shows her a picture, and her aunt's like, girl, you know who that is, right? And she's like, it's my roommate Josh. And she's like, that's Josh Darling. And she's like, well, I don't know his last name, but sure. And she's like, no, like he's a porn star. And she's like, what? And she's like, yeah, like he's like one of the hottest porn stars right now. And so she is like shook by this information. She's like, oh god, what do I do? So she goes home and she's like, don't look him up, don't look him up, don't look him up. He's not home. And she's like, okay, I gotta look him up. And he walks in on her watching his porn. And like this book has a lot of saucy scenes, but the way I described it, I think I was talking to Jessica, and I was like, you know, I don't mind like if there's some sauciness in a book, but there has to be meat and potatoes with the gravy. If it's just gravy, no thank you. But if we got the meat and potatoes with it, then it's fine. And this had the beef. It was good. So basically, he's basically trying to like show Clara that like it's not wrong for women to be sexual, and that like his big thing in like his porn scenes is like focused on women's pleasure and like all this stuff. And she basically admits to him that she's never like been able to finish with a man, and with like somebody she like always has to just like take care of business herself. And he's like, no. So then she starts learning about like all the corrupt things in like the porn industry and how it's like taking advantage of like the performers and all of this stuff. And so she and Josh decide that they want to like basically start this project, and they need to get somebody else on board. So they get his ex-girlfriend Naomi on board, and Naomi, Clara, and Josh start this website that they eventually called Shameless, and it is about, it's like porn focused on women's pleasure and like showing like almost like tutorials for like men on how to like pleasure their women, X, Y, and Z. And it's just like very like, it's very like women's pleasure focused, girl power type thing. And then eventually Josh and Clara fall in love, and it's cute. So I enjoyed that. 4 out of 5. Oh my god. Next is the worst one ever. We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I had so many people message me that they loved this book, and I'm over here like, where, why, what was good about this? I hated every single second about it. I did not like a single thing about it. You don't even know what it's about. Like, this is all it says on the back. If anyone asks you how it ends, just lie. We are Sinclairs. We live, at least in the summertime, on a private island off the coast of Massachusetts. Perhaps that is all you need to know, except that some of us are liars. But yeah, so that's all you know going into it, and it's pretty much all you know, period. It's like written in first person, I believe, about the main character. She's got a weird name. Cadence, they call her Katie, and she like had some sort of like head injury and doesn't remember shit, and then like they're keeping her away from the island after she basically like almost drowned and died, and that's like all she remembers. She doesn't really remember what happened, and basically it takes till like here in the book to find out even what you're reading about. And you basically like her parents are divorced, and her mom keeps sending her on these like elaborate vacations with her dad over the summer. It's like, no, you have to go, you can't come to the summer house. And eventually you learn, once she does eventually get to go back, that when she goes there, the doctor said it may bring back her memories, and it did. And essentially there was all this drama and fighting going on about this one house on the property, and Katie and this like guy Gat, who used to come and like hang out with them, was like a family friend, and like a couple of her cousins had this plan that they were just going to burn down the property that everybody was fighting about so that they would just shut up. And she was the only one who made it out before the house burnt down, so she essentially killed everybody. That's how she feels, and she's the only one left, and she's like hallucinating all these people. I don't know, it was very boring, not good, didn't like it, struggled through it, don't recommend it. Don't see the appeal. No, just a no. Next we had The No Show by Beth O'Leary. This was also written in narration. I think this would have been exponentially better if it was written in first person point of view. It goes between three different gals. We have Siobhan, Miranda, and Jane. And the book was pretty boring until like this much into it. Basically, three girls were all stood up by the same dude on Valentine's Day. And as you're reading it in the beginning, you're kind of meant to believe that he stood them all up on the same Valentine's Day, because one was breakfast, one was lunch, and one was like a party in the evening. So you're made to believe that he stood them all up on the same day, and as you go through, you realize that you're reading things in all different timelines. That Siobhan was like X amount, was like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. Miranda was like 2 years ago, and Jane is like present time. So essentially Siobhan, he was seeing her, they were kind of sleeping together, and they finally decided to like actually make it official, and like she had pushed him away and then didn't talk to him for months, and then wanted to get with him, but he had a girlfriend, and like he had written her a birthday card that he was going to send to her, and he never did. And after they spent some time together as friends, he was like, it's not just friends, like it's you, it's always been you. They finally decide to be together, and it's like their first Valentine's Day together, like as a real couple. He had stood her up the year before, I don't remember why, but needless to say, he stood her up, and so they're gonna be together now. And like this one, she's a life coach, and one of her clients has been kind of like following her around, like pressuring her, being really like creepy. And he's like following her on the way to the restaurant with this date, and like she's like walking across the street to like get to the restaurant, and she thought that she lost him, and he calls her name, and she looks back and she's hit by a vehicle and instantly dies. So he lost his like first love on Valentine's Day. Then he starts dating this girl Miranda, and Miranda thinks he's cheating on her. There's all this like weird suspicious activity happening. He stood her up on Valentine's Day. She found this receipt in his coat pocket for like a restaurant that was nowhere near where he said he was, and it was just like very odd. And he lives with like his mother who has dementia, and she keeps saying to him like, which one's this? Is this Siobhan? And he's like, no mom, it's Miranda. But he doesn't bring up what happened to her, and so like she breaks up with him and it's like, you've been cheating on me, da da da. And he's like, no. She's like, I found that letter to Siobhan. And he's like, yeah, I wrote that 2 years ago, like it's not like the present time. She doesn't believe him. Eventually she does, and he like tells her the whole story, and that the reason he like stood her up on Valentine's Day was like, he was just like unwell, and then like, yeah, he just wasn't well. And then like she goes over there on Valentine's Day, like present time, it's like the interception of like when he stands up Jane, and he's like passed out drunk, is like telling her the whole story. She's also simultaneously falling in love with one of her co-workers, AJ, which is pretty cute. I was rooting for them the whole time. And then you find out that the reason he stood up Jane is because like he was annihilated drunk and broke his phone and this, that, and the other thing. And eventually him and Miranda are like, okay, like you need to just like take a year off from dating. Like you need to just focus on like getting better. And then it flashes back to like him and Jane basically were like really good friends. They became nothing but friends. They like read books together, went to the library, like went to cafes, and like had like a weekly book club. Like they would pick a book and read it together. And it was like harmless, but then like she admits to having feelings and so on and so forth. And like he kind of pushes her away because he's like trying to focus on himself. And then he tells her the whole story about Siobhan, about everything, and they end up falling in love. And it had a pretty cute ending, but it just like took a while to get anywhere, and I didn't like that it was narrated. So because of those two things, I gave it a 3 out of 5. And then finally we have a 5 out of 5, The Summer After. I read this in less than 24 hours. This book gave me very much so Love in Other Words energy. It's about a girl named Persephone, and she and her family had like this summer cottage. It's based in Canada, and like Persephone was being bullied in school, and so they got the summer cottage as like a way for her to get away from everything. And she becomes friends with the boy next door, Sam. He has his brother Charlie, and the three of them hang out a lot, and her and Sam become very close. It'll go from now, and then it'll flip back to like summer 17 years ago, then 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, all the way down to 12. It's been 12 years since they have seen each other, and it's like a flashback between the two. But in the present time, Persephone gets a phone call, and she answers the phone, and it was like, is this Percy? And nobody calls her Percy anymore. Everybody calls her Persephone or P. And so she instantly knew that it was somebody from her childhood. And he's like, this is Charlie. So it was not the boy she was in love with, it was his brother. And she's like, I know we haven't talked in a long time, but our mom passed away, and I think like you need to be there. Because she was like a mom to you. And she was like, absolutely, like I'll be there. She hasn't been there in 12 years, but she goes anyway. And when she sees Sam again, they like rekindle their spark, and it goes through like I said, you're going back and forth, like when they were young to now, and you like really fall in love with them and their story and like how much they loved each other. And you're like sitting there like, well, what happened? What freaking happened to make things go so sour? And you learn that you do a flashback that it was the summer before college, and Sam wanted to be a doctor so bad, and he got into some sort of summer program, and they were so excited for it to be there. Like this is their last summer together. They needed to like really, like it was their first summer together as a couple, because they've been kind of trying to push off their feelings, but like it was their first summer as a couple, but also their last summer before college. And then he breaks the news that he got accepted to this program when he didn't even tell her he applied, and that he was going to be leaving in 3 weeks, and he would be gone the rest of the summer. So she was kind of hurt by that. But whatever, they would talk he took like a couple of weeks to even like get into contact with her once he got there. Had all these excuses, she didn't like any of them, and then he basically sent her an email that was like, we need to talk. And in the email it said that, and mind you, this whole summer like she's been very depressed, and his brother's been trying to cheer her up, like taking her, she like had this thing she did every summer of swimming across the lake, and she would like train all summer, so he was helping her with that. She was working at their mom's pierogi restaurant. Very cute. And so yeah, he gets this email from him that's like, hey, basically you're distracting me, I can't call you every day, we'll talk on Sundays, and that's it. Like I need some space. And that devastates her, and she's hysterical. And his brother's like, okay, well, like you love horror movies, this drive-in theater is like doing a horror movie, like you want to go do it, try to cheer up. You think everything's innocent, but it's not. Charlie definitely had ulterior motives, but Persephone went along with it, and they slept together. And so she slept with the love of her life's brother. And like for that whole, she The next morning she wakes up and has a panic attack, and that's like a running theme, is she like constantly has panic attacks, and she's had them for like the last 12 years. This is what started it. And she just at this point felt like she didn't deserve Sam, didn't deserve his love, and he ended up like surprising her, I think, coming home, and he proposed to her, and she was like, no, I can't marry you, and then literally never talked to him again. So she broke his heart because she felt like she was this terrible person. And so we flip back to present day, and like she keeps telling him like, no, like we can't be together, like I don't deserve you. And then they like hook up, and afterwards he like keeps telling her he loves her, and she's just like, I slept with Charlie. And you learn that Sam knew all along. Sam has known. That happened over the summer. He learned that, like, say it happened in August, he learned it in December. He knew this whole time, and he still loved her and still wanted to be with her. And he said that neither of them were to blame. He's like, you're gonna blame yourself, I'm gonna blame myself, but I just don't think it was really, like, what I did to you sucked. Like, what, like, it's what happened, but like, I still love you and I wanna be with you. And it was just really cute. The ending like literally made me cry. But they had like this family boat, and like after, like they end up deciding to be together, they move in together, it's really cute, blah blah blah. And there's like a chapter that's like 1 year later, like the epilogue, and they take out their boat to go spread his mom's ashes in the water, which is what she wanted. And she died, their dad died really when they were like super young, and then the mom died when she was only in her 50s of cancer. And they're spreading the ashes, and they're like, I don't think that, like, they're like, I'm not ready, but like it's time type stuff. And then they went back to like the house with like all of their friends, and it was like just like a really good time. And she had this on again off again friend, Delilah, and Delilah was kind of like a more out there character, very like puts herself out there to guys and stuff. And she and Sam ended up going to the same college all this time, and she was like, I promise you if I run into him I'll tell you. And when it happened, she did tell her, and she's like, yeah, he hit on me. And then Sam ended up telling her the same thing, and both of their stories were that Delilah was like, fuck you, bye, like you're gross. But she didn't believe Delilah, and like Delilah said to her, like, call me when you like figure out you're wrong. And so like 12 years later, she called Delilah and apologized. And so Delilah came, like everybody was there, and then later that night everybody left. And a big theme of the book was that they like had friendship bracelets. Like when they were like little kids, they met, and she had a friendship bracelet, and he's like, oh, that's so cool. She's like, yeah, it's a friendship bracelet. And he's like, with who? And she's like, well, actually I just made it for myself, I just like making them. He's like, oh, will you make me one? And she's like, yeah, what color do you want? I usually do it based on people's energies, but I don't really know you that well. He's like, I want mine to look just like yours. And so whenever they did anything, they'd be like, swear, and point to their bracelet. And at the end, she's like, it was just me and Sam, had a little wooden box with a ring made out of the same color thread as our friendship bracelets, and I was gonna ask him to marry me to be my family forever. And it was just so cute, and I just loved it. This is her only novel. She has a different book coming out, I believe, summer of next year, and it's already on my TBR. It was so good. But yeah, I would say these are the only 2 5 stars I had this month, was both these 2. But besides these 2, I'd say like my 3 favorites would be those 2, as well as The Perfect Marriage. I think it's funny because they're all different like genres. We've got an autobiography and a romance and a murder mystery. So yeah, next book review is going to be mainly Holly Jolly stories, so that's exciting. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not, then well, give it a thumbs down, because either way, you're helping out my channel. Comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!